Добрый вечер. Меня зовут Татьяна Тумар. Я руководитель тренингового центра компании Zfort Group. Сегодня приветствуем вас на нашем традиционном митапе ZDay. Традиционном по сути, но не по своей форме. Сегодня у нас как бы все наши шаблоны меняются, и вот с этим мы хотим вас познакомить. Мы сегодня первый раз за 3 года своего существования выходим онлайн. Ну, по понятной причине, да, почему так происходит. Но мы люди такие оптимисты по натуре, поэтому во всем видим хорошее и думаем, что, и не только думаем, а судим по регистрации гостей, которые к нам пришли на митап, география наших контактов расширяется, поэтому мы как бы работаем теперь не только с Харьковом, а со всей Украиной. Также мы сегодняшний наш митап проводим совместно с Бизнес English Академией. Это английская школа, с которой мы сотрудничаем уже 5 лет. Сотрудничеством полностью довольны. Администрация школы полностью как бы посвящена и живет интересами нашего бизнеса. Их учебные программы, качество их преподавателей, уровень их преподавателей полностью соответствует нашим требованиям. Также сегодня у нас не традиционный доклад или воркшоп. Мы сегодня решили провести интервью. Интервью с очень интересным человеком, проект-менеджером нашей компании, руководителем команды Дэвидом Брауном. Дэвид родился в Англии, работает и живет у нас на Украине, живет в городе Харькове, работает в нашей компании Zfort Group с командой украинских разработчиков. У Дэвида огромный опыт менеджерской работы, и за свою, так сказать, деятельность он пережил не один кризис, причем не только локальные кризисы. Вы сами понимаете, что локальные кризисы в работе проект-менеджера – это обыденное дело. И наш прошлый митап мы проводили как раз вот тушение пожаров, это как раз вот о работе проект-менеджера. Но, наверное, в жизни Дэвида были и более глобальные кризисы. Вот сегодня мы попросили поделиться с нами его мыслями, его опытом по этому поводу. Интервью будет проходить на английском языке. И поэтому мы попросили помочь и провести это интервью Kateryну Metolidi, директора Бизнес English Академии. Спасибо, Катя, большое, что вы согласились нам помочь. Естественно, мы готовились к этому интервью и, естественно, заготовили ряд вопросов определенных. Но, тем не менее, мы очень рассчитываем, что это не просто будет как бы подготовлены наши вопросы, что вы тоже будете очень активно участвовать в этом процессе и будете задавать свои вопросы. Для этого у нас есть чат. Приветствуются любые вопросы в любых количествах. И, в общем-то, я надеюсь, что сегодняшняя встреча наша будет не только интересной, но и полезной для всех вас. Итак, приятного просмотра.
Добрый день всем. Так, как слышно нас? Давайте сделаем небольшую проверку связи. Все ли хорошо, все ли на местах, всех ли слышно. Поэтому, если все окей и все на месте, все готовы, пожалуйста, поставьте плюсик в чате, чтобы мы знали, что все в порядке и все у нас идет хорошо. А пока я сейчас немного расскажу про структуру сегодняшнего интервью. Мы решили идти новыми шагами и сделать наш митап в виде интервью с Дэвидом, потрясающим человеком и очень интересным спикером. У нас будет 2 больших блока. Первые 2 блока будут касаться кризиса вообще в мире и как разные страны реагируют на этот кризис. После него мы будем задавать именно ваши вопросы Дэвиду. И второй блок будет посвящен непосредственно путям выхода из кризиса и как и куда двигаться украинскому рынку, украинским IT-проектам, украинской IT-структуре в такие нелегкие времена. После 4-го блока мы также Дэвиду зададим самые лучшие, самые интересные вопросы. Как говорится, самое-самое интересное и животрепещущее мы оставили на конец, поэтому, пожалуйста, ребят, будьте активными, мы будем очень рады вот непосредственно задавать вопросы, которые интересуют вас, чтобы это было полезно и очень down to earth. Вот. Сейчас давайте тогда начинать. Я вижу, что все вроде бы окей. And let's start. Let's start with the first point. And the first point deals with the global crisis, that's happening right now. So, David, hi.
Hey.
Yeah. Great. Super. I'm really glad to hear you today because, you know, in these tough times, that is really good to follow some person who knows what we should do and what are the ways out. Yeah. Can you tell me what's your point of view to that crisis that's happening right now all over the world? So some people are in shock, some people are in panic, some people are already managing to go out from the quarantine, some countries like we are sitting still at home. So what do you think generally about the situation that's happening right now?
Well, one of the things I follow obviously the English media as well, and one of the words that they use quite often is unprecedented. And with unprecedented, it is very true, because we might have witnessed events globally as a global community. We might have witnessed events that went around the world, but this is the first time I think anybody can remember in their lifetime that something has happened that's affected the whole world, that, you know, nowhere seems to be unaffected by it. And when we look at that, it affects everybody's lives in different ways. It affects, you know, every part of our life, not just something to do with our work or our home. Everything to do with our life is affected by this. There's nothing that remains unaffected. And, you know, from a point of view of just a working environment, it drastically changes, you know, how you go about your work in day, because in technology, we're very lucky that logistically, it's not so hard for us to go and work remotely from home. But when it's not your choice, and when you're not choosing when you do that, and when you're having to do it every day, then it brings challenges that you don't know until they hit you. So you have to do that. And what I found as well from a project manager role is things that you naturally just rely on, you don't notice their absence until they're gone. So I'm talking about just the conversations that you have in the office, the way that you interact with people. You can sustain it for a short period of time. And I'm lucky I've had experience of working with remote teams in the past in different countries. And that helps to a large degree for myself. But even this way is slightly different, that everybody is not just working in a remote office, they're working in remotely. So it puts pressure on you to keep the communication going, to keep people talking to each other, to look after their welfare, etc. So, and also it has a huge impact, of course, on the stakeholders we work with as well. And we mustn't forget that they are facing challenges that sometimes we can't perceive. They really are under pressure, but equally so, they're still people like us. So they're probably having the same problems, that they're trying to manage business issues whilst struggling with the fact that they've got a child in the next room who's wanting attention, etc. And these challenges are fun for the first week, but by the second week it gets a little bit tricky, I imagine. So
yeah, these weeks, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Tougher, yeah.
And you know, we saw recently in Italy where they let the children out for 1 hour a day for the first time in like 11 weeks or something. You know, imagine the joy on those children's faces, and perhaps the joy on their parents' faces as well when they got that 1 hour break sort of thing. So, you know, these things are strange. You know, when I talk to my friends, we say, you always used to talk about this. What would it be like if you could just work from home all the time? And unfortunately, for some reality is okay, and for some reality is not so good. So
Yeah, sure. You know, right now everyone is looking for some magic pill, you know, how to make everything like that and return everything, you know, like back as it was, as it used to be. So like, is there any universal strategy how people can, you know, walk through that crisis, how they can manage and tackle all the problems that are happening right now?
I think if we look at any crisis, then there are steps that you can do to control the crisis. The first thing you said there is to get things back to the way they were. And one thing I've learned about dealing with crisis is that's not always a solution you get. And it's not always the preferred solution, because every crisis can also present opportunities as well. Because while you're actually trying to fix the crisis, you're looking at what caused it. And by looking at what caused it, you may realize that things needed changing anyway, so you don't go back to as it was. And I think we will see that with this crisis, things will change. People will adapt their behaviors, even if it's only for short term. People will look at things and be impacted by it. I look at a lot of, if you can imagine being an older person and you're having this lockdown for a long period of time, it may change your behavior, that you may decide that going out's quite a scary thing now, because you've got almost get comfortable with it. So I certainly see that looking at my parents. So the point is, like, it won't go back to being the same. I really don't think it will be. People will change. People will be more careful about different things. They might view public transport differently. They might view going to popularly attended events differently. I'm not saying everybody will, but I certainly think it will have an impact. So that's the one thing I would say when you're looking at crisis, is not to think, I just need to get it back to as it was. Because that can be the first mistake, you know, that you can make by doing that. And one of the things I look at is just to follow some steps and to say, you know, you should have a plan. And that's what I mean. You agree, what is the end of this crisis? And we are seeing that as we look across the world. We can see countries are looking at that. They're talking about exit strategies and different ways of coming out. So that's what their plan is. And you need to identify responsibilities as you go through the crisis. And you need to make sure people know their responsibilities. Don't have the opportunity just to think you've passed the job to somebody else and therefore you can relax. You need to identify that. And again, this is why I say this global crisis is as terrible as it is. I think it's a unique learning opportunity for everybody to look at these things, and you haven't just got one example, because you can look at lots of different countries tackling the same problem and you can compare how they're doing it, and you can try and do it in a very objective way rather than trying to just view the personalities involved and try and look at how they do it. So again, they identify the responsibilities. So we see these people we never heard of in countries, you know, these health people that we've never heard of, who are very important. Being honest and open, we see a lot of countries doing daily briefings, etc. And you keep everybody informed, both internally and externally, and then update regularly and early. And what I mean by early is, don't just wait till the prescribed time. If you've got good or bad news beforehand that needs to be shared, then do that as well. So, and we are seeing all these steps as well. If we just look at the way countries are dealing with it, we're seeing this, we're almost overwhelmed by the amount of information we're getting. So
yeah. Now we're getting, you know, like to the most interesting part, I suppose, for everyone, you know, what are the real cases from your experience of crisis management? Because, you know, like everyone has experienced any type of the crisis. Guys, now the question is to you. You know, like Ukraine is really turbulent country, I'm sure. And we experienced like many different crises. They were called differently: economic crisis, war crisis, etc., etc., etc. Can you put the number of the crises that you experienced in your life, you know, from 0 to maybe, I don't know, like 10, 11, 12, whatever. That now about you, can you tell the real cases from project management, from your work, from the crisis situation, and from your way out of that?
I think I'll give two examples. One's a very short one. It was when I was quite young in my management career, and we were doing something. I worked for a company that was a finance company at the time, we lent money in to lend it out, which means we borrowed money from somebody, a big lot of money, millions of pounds, and our idea was that we'd lend it to people, to individuals. And so the quicker you can lend it out, the less money you make. So it's all on that. And we had a plan to do this through a big initiative with people phoning in, and we would sell this money to them. And we had a plan. We really gone into town on metrics, etc. We knew exactly what our success rate would be, and we had everything planned. And so everybody was coming to the office that day, and the day before it snowed. On the night it snowed, and so people were phoning in to say they couldn't come in, and we weren't in a situation where we could just direct calls to people in their homes. So we then had really less than a third of the people that we expected in, and it was a real shock because everybody just knew that we needed to lend this money very rapidly. And so we had to just quickly adapt a new strategy, which was, okay, what do we need to do? We need to get as many people interested as possible, rather than having people just calling in and nobody be there to answer. So we had to just change the strategy. And as I mentioned before, just throughout the day, we would just stop every now and again. I would talk to individual people to try and see how it was going, to see whether we were doing. And it was a really nervous day because lots of them, as I say, I was very junior in my management career, and lots of the management were constantly looking at the figures, etc., and seeing what we did. And in the end, we got through it and we pulled it off. But the most important thing was, as I said there, was that we were faced with a situation where if we'd have just said, let's have it back as we have now, we would have failed totally, because we'd have just done what we were trying to do anyway, and we would have actually lost more business than we won. So by just changing and adopting our strategy, we were able to, have a huge success. The team were fantastic that day, really, because there was a lot of pressure for them. They couldn't take breaks and things like that. So it was good. I think a more larger one actually involves my first time in Ukraine.
That is something interesting. So cultural.
Not a problem with Ukraine.
Okay.
I was actually linked to a project more for my product knowledge than to anything to do with that. So somebody else was assigned as a project manager role to talk to that. And we came out to Ukraine, and it was the first time we were using an outsourced team. It was a very large technical problem where we were breaking up a very old monolithic project, and we were splitting that out. We were working with teams across the globe. So we had a team in Canada, teams in Sweden, 2 teams in England. Very huge project. And in the first week when we were talking to the outsourced team, we realized that our sales team had done a terrible job and completely undersold it.
Okay.
So it meant that, so it was really bad.
So Ukrainian salespeople weren't, doing
No, they were very good. They were very honest, because they could have just said yes and then told us when we were a little bit more committed, but they told us straight away, this is not what we were told we were doing. This wasn't, our quote wasn't for this. And the problem was that we went back to the UK. I expected the project to fold immediately, but the company were a little bit committed, so they put up the bill. But immediately this project within the company got this failed status already written on top of it. It was almost as if this is a failed project. And then they sacked the project manager, fired the project manager, but decided not to replace them because it was a failed project in their eyes. So why bother? But the trouble was that the team in Ukraine, which is in Kharkiv, they needed that guide. They needed somebody to guide. And so I sort of took on that mantle, and again, had to try and make sure that we had a plan, revised the plan, make sure we started pushing that forward. And we, worked really hard on it. And the difference between the 2 examples I'm giving is the second one. The only way that we could ever actually say we were out of the crisis was when the project was completed. That was the only way you could say, and that was a year. So it was a year of management, and it was a year of thinking, I really just don't want to fail this. I've never been so determined in my life to not fail something and to actually turn it around from the failed status it was carrying around. And, not just myself, but, through actually sort of adopting again some of those things we've talked about, that attention, that honesty and openness and the communication. I'm, always try to be available for communication at any time. And I think through that, we were able to get through the crisis very easily. And the project was a huge success in the end. It really was a big success. So for me, that's just one way. It's talking about the fact that, as I say, again, you don't know. The end was very clear in that one. The end was we just had to deliver and make it a success. There was no two ways about it. The problem is that we were starting, 6 feet behind or 6 meters behind the starting line when everybody else was starting. So it was very difficult. But the problem was we had different teams now working at different paces, and it was just a huge thing. And that's why I say to look at a crisis that can have challenges. We'll look at a global crisis now, and the one crisis is that we have this virus, but there's lots of other crises happening around it, economically, people health-wise, apart from the virus, lots of other crises. And that's what I found on that project, that every time I thought it was in a clear, some crisis would hit because we were just running all the time. So, and that's what you'll find in a crisis. So you've just got to keep paying attention and adapting. And that's why the communication, as I said, is really key on that.
When you were telling about the crisis that happened to you at your first visit to Ukraine, you said that the smart decision was to fire the project manager. Yeah. So
well, the smart decision, to be fair, the project manager wasn't fired for that, because, as I say, the sales team were the people who had done the bad job in sort of like explaining the scope to the team in Ukraine, to explain what the scope of the project was. What the project manager failed was handling that after that time. And one of the things I always say in a crisis is, don't look for who to blame. That's not your first objective. It can always seem like the emotional thing. Crises make us become emotional rather than analytical. And quite often we go and look for who's to blame, who's making me feel this pressure. And we go around and try and find whoever's to blame. But it doesn't solve the problem. And that's what the project manager did. And that's why they got fired from the project, because they were focusing too long on that.
Yeah, and it's really felt right now, there are a lot of social conflicts when people are looking for someone to blame, because, the social anger is rising, how to work in the team in this case, because people are really nervous, they are really angry inside. How to manage the team in this process, to be subjective, to be objective, to be optimistic, pessimistic. What's your point of view? What is the role here of the project manager? I mean, even from the psychological point of view, because the project manager is leader, he is leader of his team. He needs to help his team, somehow to survive and to move through that situation.
Well, you use the word there about showing leadership, and you need to do that, and you need to, even though it's difficult at times, and I know that too well, you have to be the one that is above the emotion of it, and you need to try and show that leadership. One tip is, though, your leadership doesn't start when a crisis hits. Your leadership, you should be fostering that with your team, with your stakeholders, at all opportunities, so that they know what you are. And leadership isn't about being in a powerful position. It's about taking ownership and being responsible in that way. And with the team as well, you talk there, right? You're right. People will moan, they're upset, etc. You can't always stop that. But what you can do is try and allow them times to do that. So manage that. Have periods where they can speak honestly and they can talk honestly. As long as they all know, once that period's over, they go back to doing what is the way to solve the crisis. But let them have those times. And you, at times, in those times, can speak honestly yourself, because I think then it shows that you are not somebody who's not bothered about things. You can say, yeah, that really upset me, etc. That's upset me. And let the people talk. Let them say that they think you're doing wrong. Let them have to say, but control it and have it in small bursts, so that they can just let that pressure off. If you see, and sometimes you have to do it with empathy as well. I've been on projects where I've seen people they're almost so frustrated with this. You let them have that conversation one-on-one, and then maybe you just say, you need to just take some time away. And that's more beneficial for them, because particularly if they're, a positive member of your team, somebody who really does, everybody can get frustrated. So at a time like this, that's what I'm talking about, with the fact that you need to be extra responsible. You're not having that day-to-day contact with people. So you need to be trying to find that out, look for the signs yourself, not just with your team, but also with your stakeholders as well. Look for the signs that where their pressure is.
Yeah, that's great. So, guys, now we are looking for your questions. Сейчас мы ждем все вопросы. Можете писать на русском языке. Будем переводить Дэвиду и узнавать его мнение по поводу глобальной картинки кризиса и как вы по поводу кризиса в целом, по поводу проект-менеджмента во время кризиса, общей теории, потому что дальше мы перейдем к украинским реалиям. Пока, если есть у кого вопросы относительно общей картины мира, ждем в нашем чате. И я вижу уже первый вопрос, я думаю, от опытного project management менеджера. Okay, David, and here we have the first question, and it sounds like, so how to support the team when you have zero resource yourself?
When you mean you have nobody in your team, or you mean that you have no time yourself?
When you feel empty, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you feel upset, miserable, etc., etc., and you need to support the whole team.
You need to almost do that thing where you talk into a mirror, and you need to almost be your own manager. Believe me, I've been in those situations. The crisis I told you when I told you about the project I was dealing on, there were times when I was just really very low. I remember, and people might say, this is a strange thing to say, I remember being in the Premier Palace Hotel, and people might say, well, that's a great place to be, but not when you're working over a weekend in a room all by yourself and it's snow outside. And I remember just thinking, I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to go back to the UK. I just want to give up and just say somebody else can run with this. And what I did was I just literally just got myself up, got dressed, and walked in the snow, and I walked quite a long way in the snow. The streets were empty, nobody's around, and I just forgot about everything because all of a sudden I was distracted. My mind was distracted, and I think that's what you need to do. You need to manage yourself. You need to, you can do that. If you have somebody, a mentor, somebody you can talk to, do talk to them. Sometimes, like I talked to you also about having these letting off steam sessions, why not just arrange one with your team, tell them that it's a time for only speak, and it's really just for you to let off steam, but you'll be surprised, people will join in, they'll empathize with you, you'll feel not so alone. So unfortunately, that's it. You either need to have a mentor or you need to be your own mentor.
So here, the second question, what spheres will get a special boost due to the crisis situation? There are some conspirology theories, that say that Zoom was the sponsor of coronavirus.
Yeah. I mean, lots of companies, I talked earlier about the fact that we might see a change in lifestyles. People will have been looking around in their homes and how they keep themselves entertained in their homes. So there's going to be people out there who are going to look at those things. We saw that Netflix, people like Disney, they really increased their fold. And it's easy to say, well, with all the extra money, they can just buy more server capacities to serve people. But they'll be sort of like looking at how they can stream those information better, to how can games be done better in that respect. More people are shopping online, but what other services can go online? What other services that we traditionally rely on in a building going to, how can they be put online to protect themselves against such a crisis in the future? So they're ready, and therefore I would look at which businesses have been very affected by this, that just can't continue on. How could they have better protected themselves? And that's where opportunities come into play on that one there. So I think these kind of technologies will do that as people change. When we were talking about this in the preparation for this, we talked about the fact that statistics recently show that the two biggest growth markets at the moment are fitness equipment for in the home and alcohol. So it's just
there
like
are two ways out, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like shopping in December, where people are getting the alcohol in for New Year, but also the fitness equipment for January, and one of those will end up not being used in January. But those are the kind of things. So how can people improve that? How can they make it more? What innovations can they do for that? So these are the kind of areas that people can target. And again, I talked earlier about the most vulnerable people in this, and are normally the elderly, and in the current generation, they are perhaps a lot of the people who are out of touch in technology. So how can they be reached out to? How can we improve technology to make it more accessible to them?
Yeah.
Having a conversation with my parents the other day where we were sharing it via Zoom and all I saw was their ceiling, then, you know, we need to think of how we can make it easier for them to use these technologies. So that I think there are lots of things, but I genuinely think that, you know,
Yeah.
it'll be, look at the services that just currently are most affected by this and can't go online.
Great, good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, now we are coming to the third block of our today's meeting that deal with the national peculiarities of working, of projects, and so on. So, David, the first question is the following. So, I suppose you have projects from different countries and clients from different parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do different countries and different clients react to crisis? Are there any difference in their behavior, in their way of making business, and either like any tendencies that you can see, observe, and so on?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the day, I've talked earlier about the fact that countries deal with this whole crisis in different ways. We see that. We see the same problem being solved different ways. One of the ways that we see it, and sometimes we can be very judgmental, is that some countries were slower than others to impose lockdowns in the countries. And a lot of the time, it's because of the fact that in those countries, it may seem more difficult to impose on people's personal freedoms. And some countries might think, well, that's crazy. People, you know, this is a really infectious virus and people are dying. You know, why would they worry about personal freedoms? But these things are baked into their culture.
China have no questions at all.
Yeah, exactly. But in Sweden, they're in restaurants, they're in bars, they're going to school, etc. And so this will tell you about a lot about these things. My experience, though, I've worked with many international teams, is it's not always the best idea to try and look at national traits when you're working with people, because normally you're always going to be working with a small group of people. You know, the word minority doesn't come into it. You're talking about a very small subset of people, and teams and people you work with are normally more culturally they're more culturally biased by their companies they work in. So I've worked in companies where different offices of the same company are culturally different because of that. And teams, you know, you can work with two different companies in the same country and they'll be culturally different. I think you have to really talk to the people in the team and try to make that judgment. And certainly, yeah, you may sort of think that's a bit strange, their response, and you might find some of their behavior is different. And you might then find out that is because this is the behavioral norm. Talking about Sweden, again, I was always surprised that when I was working on a project and it was under a lot of pressure, that people in the Swedish office, they always have a 4-week holiday. And they just said on the Thursday before, we're on holiday next week for the next 4 weeks. And I was very much like, wow, that's great. That's just blown my project. And they were just, but it was, to them, it was very important. It wasn't just something that they weren't just being sort of like, oh, well, we don't care. It was just, this is our right. This is what we do, sort of thing. So, so sometimes you see that, but as long as you get to know those people and understand, then I think you can try to work with those people. And because sometimes you've got to make sure that those traits, even if they are to do with the country they're from or from the company from, do not disrupt what you're doing, etc., and don't disrupt people in other teams.
I've heard that there are some German projects that are leaving the Ukrainian market right now, so that they get some subsidiary help from the government. Definitely, Ukrainian market is afraid of these tendencies because right now, for example, in the United States, the unemployment level is like about 4.4 million people, and it's going to increase.
Yeah. And we have and in the UK, we have the situation where people are being allowed to continue working for the company, but they don't actually go to work. I mean, they're under contract with the company, but the government will pay them 80% of their salary. So they're staying at home until the 30th of June. And again, this is this is to try and help businesses to stay in business until they come back, and that might work, etc. However, the big issue with that, as you say, is when they come back, these companies are going to be in a worse state. So are they going to be able to take all those people on board? What cuts are they going to make? I'm sure there's people, you know, who are listening today who will have seen that effect close at hand already, as you say, with USA companies trying to cut their budgets, trying to work out where every dollar is spent. This will have an impact, and there is no escaping this. This is why. But the one thing I would say from a Ukraine point of view is that I think it might try and level the playing field a little bit more, because I think that the economic impact will be much more felt in the US than it would be in Ukraine, in terms of if you compare dollars to dollars, you know, sort of thing, that Ukraine will suffer losses, certainly like every country, but I don't think it will suffer at the same rate as other countries where this is hugely impacted, etc. Where, you know, the health services and things like that. I mean, if you think about the UK, somebody's going to have to pay for that at one point. Somebody's going to have to pay for the government paying 80% of, you know, thousands of people's salary. Somebody's going to have to pay that money back at some point. So that's going to have another economic effect further down the line. So we need to see, maybe, therefore, there are opportunities to look to help those things to be more positive, and to look to go to these companies who may be thinking reluctantly they have to cut back on their roadmaps, on their work, and it's an opportunity to go in and try to say that there is another way, that they shouldn't just be thinking about, you know, well, we just need to cut everything. So.
And, you know, like in this situation, you know, probably one of the most important question is how to hold the clients, how to retain the clients, and so on. Because as you said, they are cutting their budgets. Like we felt that really, because the first spheres that had some restrictions were like educational sphere, event management, I suppose, and maybe some benefits for the workers. And that was just the start, you know, how not to lose the client, you know, and how to continue working with him during the long term.
Well, I've already mentioned about that your client isn't just a client, it's a person as well, going through not just the pressures of business upheaval, but also personal upheaval, because again, they will be in those same position that they're having to make, you know, huge adjustments to their personal life while they're going through all this upheaval at the same time. But the other thing is to just not to continue to offer the same thing every day. It's to look at what else you can do. I've talked about this before with people, about the fact that as a developer, you're not just a .NET developer, you're not just a React developer, you're not an automated QA engineer, you're not these different roles. You can offer a lot more. People build up experience, they deliver different projects, etc. And sometimes this is where people can step up to offer ideas and be creative in trying to work much closer in partnership, not just delivering a project, not just delivering a particular product to them, but actually saying, well, what else can we do? What else can we do to help you through this crisis? What are the problems you're facing? Because sometimes they might not look at you as the people they're talking to this about. They may not see you. So sometimes you have to just be the one who goes forward and says, what else can we do for you? What else can we try and help with? To make yourself more valuable to the client, etc., to help them. I can give an example from the project I'm working on, whereby members of my team are working with the client on their own internal sort of like idea generation committees. They had a little competition internally, and people from my team volunteered to go on there to get involved in those small projects. So they were just on their own with the client, you know, not with a small group of client people who they perhaps never spoke to before, just trying to think of ideas of different ways of generating business. So, and this is great, you know, because by providing those ideas, it helps them as individuals, but it also says to the client, look, we're involved with you. We're trying to help you. We're not seeing this as a relationship that's just very distant. It's not that. We're thinking it's very much a partnership. And I think that's you know, as I say, think about the client as people, and think about how you can help them. And I think that can do. Ultimately, clients have budgets, they have things, and they will cut. And that is always going to be the way. They, you know, there's no way that you can get around that fact. That is going to happen. And they're not going to be able to reproduce all the things that maybe they've lost during the crisis. But at least by trying to be more, to make them see you as more valuable, then they might make different decisions.
So do I understand you right? So like Ukrainian teams have to work more on customer service that we actually lack. Yeah, and to be more empathetic.
I don't think it's that it's lacked. I think it's just quite often communication, in my experience, is done through a hierarchy. So so normally a lot of people won't always talk directly with the client, etc. And when they do, it'll be about a particular scenario, and it'll be very much the relationship of, you've asked me to do this and I need to ask a question about that. This is a little bit more of, we're doing this for you, but what other issues are you facing? You know, how is the whole crisis affecting you? What challenges is it bringing? Is there anything we could be doing? I guess in a way it's acting more as salespeople than anything else, but I like to think in more of being empathetic to your client, and trying not to think of a client and, you know, relationship, but to try and think about it as two people talking about the universal problems that they've got, and trying to find solutions. Because at the same time, it makes it easier for you then to share, you know, any problems you've got in the future, to say, you know, we've got these issues. So I think, as you rightly say, it is about customer service, but it's about just pushing yourself out there. I think any crisis brings opportunities. And for people who perhaps have sat at their desks for a long time thinking, I wish I could do a little bit more, something a bit different, it's a great opportunity to get involved in that. And so it's not always just for the project manager to go and delegate his team to do it. He or she should be looking for the team to be coming to them with ideas as well at the same time. So, you know, to say, look, I want to go and talk to the client about how they tackle the global crisis, give me your ideas, etc. And then taking those ideas to the client.
Yeah, good, great, thank you. Ребят, теперь вопрос к вам. Затронул ли вас кризис вообще? Отразился ли он как-то на вашей работе? Если затронул, пожалуйста, поставьте плюсик, чтобы мы знали, что все-таки наша тема сейчас актуальна. Если работаете так же, как и работали раньше, просто изному, можете просто ставить минус. And we are moving to the last, but the most important topic. These are the ways of overcoming the crisis. And the first question is the prospects and the forecast for the future IT market. As we've got the question before, so what spheres are going to thrive in the recent years, and what we should be looking for, what projects should Ukraine be hunting, or, as you said before, developing itself?
Yeah, I think it will be a bit of both, really. The prospects and forecasts, I think we've talked about the fact that it's going to be tough for a few months. There are going to be we're not going to be spared, but from what's happening around the world with people losing their jobs, and we will see that, and that's going to be a difficult time for everybody to do. What I've noticed, what I've seen, and this is, you know, genuinely what's always impressed me since I've worked with people in Ukraine, is that they are very, you know, hardworking. I don't mean that in a very just sense of, well, they just work hard and that's it. I mean, they are very committed to the projects that they work on. And I think that's something that will stand them in good stead, because, as I've just said, you know, we can try and look at this as an opportunity to say, if companies are a little bit fearful about their spends, maybe that gives us an advantage in some domestic in some markets to go in on the fact that we can compete on a cost basis to allow them to have the growth that they want, but without the cost that they may do. So there might be people who in the past have been a little bit maybe wary of looking at outsource, but now might be an opportunity to do that, because I think you know, there is some stability, and to show how, as an industry overall, we will get through the crisis. We have startups, and there's no reason, again, to think about this might not give us a more level playing field in terms of being able to do that. So we should be, again, looking to be active in that market, to not just try and to suggest that we don't have that capital. You know, we need to branch out and look at actually getting that capital in there to sell what we have, because we really do have, you know, certainly in Kharkiv and Kiev, two very, very strong IT bases that are really, you know, I mean, very strong. And, you know, we need to sell. That will mean working together, not company by company, but, you know, companies together to sell that. I think if they can sell, we can sell that and sell the experience here. I think that can attract investment as well. And because we've shown time and time again, and we've seen it particularly during the crisis, we've seen it that, you know, people in the IT industry in Ukraine are stepping up to be creative in terms of putting out very quickly, adapting projects, adapting software to help clients in that thing. And this should be shared out, that we should be broadcasting this news very widely. We should be advertising it. Because I really do think that we do have very strong people here. We see many, many, you know, great specialists here move abroad to further their careers. And what we need to be doing is to be trying to look to give those opportunities here in this country, so that we don't lose those people to these countries. Because I don't often, to be honest, think that it necessarily is for hugely more important roles, etc. I think it's more that they want to be working directly for the companies themselves, rather than sort of like as a third party. So I think that's where we need to build on there. And, you know, technology is always based on innovation. And again, I think we do have a huge amount of innovation. And I think, again, it's a time for people to be looking at that, to making sure they get involved in, as I say, not just on a company by company basis, but a cross company thing, in terms of looking at innovation and how we can actually produce things to fill these opportunities in the market that I've talked about, to identify those and working together. That would be the way that we can actually start to say, well, why can't we, as a group of companies, look to have some sort of innovation workshops that work, where the best people can come together and spend their time to actually build these products, rather than having the ideas and leaving one person to try and solve it on their own. And perhaps they get to a point where they have no money, and then they can't take it any further. And that way,
yeah, you know, in these at these times when all the countries and all big companies are trying to, you know, to cut their cost and so on, will it mean that more projects will move to Ukraine rather than stay at home? Can Ukraine be a kind of second China, you know, like in IT industry sphere, or maybe vice versa processes, as Germans do? They try to make their own market, you know, like try to make it extend more.
Well, I think there will be a tendency to think about going home, and there'll be a pressure from governments in many respects, I think, to tell employers to look internally, because particularly, as you've said, in America, a lot of people out of work, and therefore it is. But I'm going to bet you that the people who are out of work, there are not a lot of people, not going to be a huge amount of people in technology. It's not the technology is going to be affected. It's going to be people who work in the service industry, things that I've talked about that haven't been able to adapt to an online world. They haven't been able to quickly do that. And that's where a lot of the cuts are going to be. It's going to be in things like haulage and things like this, things that require people to be out and about to do their work. So that's going to be a lot. Is there going to be the available resources to retrain these people to take on the technology? I don't believe there will be. And
too hard, you know, that there should be like some system requalifying and so on.
But yeah, but if you're talking about 4 million people, you're not going to be able to retrain those. So I think there will be opportunities in those spaces. I think there will be. I think, again, we talked about you know, startups, etc. There are going to be people who are quite already working on things that they're seeing and observing. They're going to be people who are working on ideas to plug gaps. They're going to be monitoring social media and seeing what people are talking about, what they're saying is missing from their current situation. And they're going to be looking to get those innovations in place. A lot of those are going to perhaps get to a position where they need to see rapid growth. And, you know, we're very good at actually providing that for them, that opportunity. We're very good at actually being able to say, here's the resource you need to allow that rapid growth. And, you know, particularly for companies that are in a fragile early state, it's perfect for them.
Yeah. As you mentioned before, Ukrainians are really hardworking, and like, you know, more and more people are just ready to turn their speciality like that. Yesterday, the person was like in this year of service, and now he wants to enter the IT industry, some fears and so on. Just the question to you, like, what technologies people should learn? Where do you see the future? What experienced, you know, like a lot of people are unemployed here right now. The level of unemployment is like 14% just here in Ukraine. And if we open LinkedIn, we can see like a lot of people who are looking for the jobs, and these are the developers as well. So a lot of companies had some cuttings and shortenings, like, what should they learn in order to adapt to the development and to the future?
I know it's always the idea is to say, well, it's technology and therefore they should be looking at mobile technologies and that kind of way. And that's an obvious answer to the question. I would rather answer it in a different way, which is to say, what do I see missing when I see a lot of developers? And a lot of that is that they're tied to don't be tied to the technology, me more to the actual problem solving and the logic of solving problems and creating solutions, regardless of the technology. That's a huge strength. We've just been talking about innovation. We've been talking about rapid development. We've been talking about these things. Technology takes you part of the way there, but you need to be able to solve those problems. You need to be able to solve those problems as independently as possible. And you need to be creative to be able to not only to solve those problems, but to help the team solve the problems. These factors sometimes are often overlooked. So you can have a good developer who knows their technology inside out, but unfortunately, sometimes the problems, when they're faced with a problem, they find it hard to overcome. Those are the kind of skills that I would say that people should also be looking at, to try and think logically about those things, because just tying yourself to a technology, the problem is that I have seen in my time in the IT industry, you know, huge popularity with certain technologies, which, you know, fall as quickly as they rose. And people went out, they spent lots of money on training, and they went to become a contractor because they'd got this training and they were going to be a contractor. They were going to make lots and lots of money. And then by the time they did everything, nobody was looking for this anymore. Nobody was looking for this skill anymore. And you're a little bit lost. So, you know, I think the good developers I've known have been able to adopt new technologies as they work. And they've been able to do that because they have that underlying skill of being able to solve problems. And that's the underlying skill that they have. So the technology is just a tool they use to solve the problem. And when you look at it that way around, then it's a little bit, it makes you a stronger person, I think, rather than just give me something and I will be able to just write it in this technology. So.
Yeah. The last question here is that people right now are tending to have, you know, some habits due to all that stuff that's happening and to the lockdown. Do you have anything like that? Probably morning exercises, I don't know, drinking 3 liters of water, or any other life hack that you can give that you adapted during the crisis that's happening right now?
Well, somebody asked the question earlier on, didn't they, about how do you, when you've got zero left, how do you manage yourself? And I think I found that here in the first few weeks. I was focused on very much on work. I was doing a lot of work. Plus I had a lot of difficulties because when everything lockdown started, I was stuck in the UK. And so there was a lot of things going on. And then as things have normalized, I I had to then sort of like discipline myself and say, right, nobody else is going to do the exercise for you. Nobody else is going to look after yourself. So, so as you see today, I wear my shirt. It's just my way of saying I'm at work. It's my way of telling myself I'm at work. And then I get changed after work. And so I'm trying to keep a rota and things like that. Just helps me to focus my mind, doing as you say, doing exercise, but also trying to do the things to keep you stimulated outside of work, etc. Because we'll lose a lot of the stimulation from just general life of going out, being amongst people, etc. So throwing myself a little bit more into just hobbies that I've not done for ages, etc. And trying to actually, it sounds a bit, may sound a bit silly, but I'm creating quizzes for family and friends. So I'm spending time doing that and sending them out. So it helps them during their boredom, etc. in lockdown. I'm able to just create something. It keeps me creative in mind. So things like that, just trying to look out for other people and trying to be creative. But at the same time, yeah, it's so easy to be at home and just fall into sort of like bad routines. And so you do have to be your own manager and think one day we're all going to go back to work. And that day is going to be just as much as a shock as it was.
You have to be prepared.
Yeah, it's going to be just as much as a shock as when people said you can't go out of your house. It's going to be, some people are going to be like, I've got to go out of my house.
Who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All these white, pale people will be walking out of their house.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you. Так, мы заканчиваем наш 4-й блок, и сейчас мы ждем вопросов от всех относительно ситуации в Украине, в украинском IT-секторе и направлениях выхода из кризиса. Пожалуйста, задавайте вопросы, и как раз сейчас узнаем мнение Дэвида по поводу некоторых фактов. So we are looking for the questions, and we hope that someone is willing to know some interesting fact that will happen to Ukrainian market. So here we have what specialities in Ukrainian IT will suffer the most?
Which specialities?
Mm-hmm.
To my mind, I think anything that's attached to very large projects will suffer the most, because it's quite obvious that to my mind that's where most cuts will happen, etc. More niche teams will be okay, but it will be the industries that are under pressure in different ways. You just have to look at the industries that are suffering at the moment. So anything that caters for restaurants and bars and things like that. Traveling is a huge one. Yeah, you're right. Anything to do with airlines and things like that will take a huge factor. But also, let's say, service industry, because there's just going to be less market for those companies that rely on sort of like restaurants, bars, etc. as a service industry. So those things will suffer in particular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so not look at the at technology at your sphere, but just to look general, to the.
Yeah, I think that's it, to see where, because it's the technology that's around there. I've worked on projects that are related to sort of restaurants, and they provide those services, so they're going to get cut as well as anybody.
So David, you told that you are in Ukraine and you experience, double lockdown.
Yeah.
So we have the question, are there any sites or articles or YouTube channels that you enjoy every day and that encourage you?
Okay, I will tell you this is there's two things that have been really good.
People are interested what you are searching at YouTube.
Okay, what am I searching at YouTube? I have a football club that I follow, and they have been great during this, that they just keep putting old football games on, like really good games that they played, matches that they played, and they put up a new one every week. So quite often while I'm working, I have picture-in-picture of a great match, and that's really good, because that makes you have really happy memories, very positive, and it starts chats then with people. You start chatting to people about, do you remember this, etc. That's one thing. The other thing that I've really got into is I was listening to a history podcast on British history. And
British history.
yeah,
Okay.
British history. Sorry about that.
Okay.
But it's
Okay.
very, very in depth. It's very in depth. We're on episode 300 and we've only got to the year 900. So that shows you how in depth it is. That's great because then it always makes me go off and look at something else. It stimulates me to think.
Football history.
Yeah, football history.
And
If you're on Netflix, Studio Ghibli films.
what?
Japanese films. Studio Ghibli.
Japanese films.
Yeah, Studio Ghibli. They're nice because I showed them to my daughter many years ago, and now they're all on Netflix. So I'm rewatching them, and then I'm talking to her after and saying, "I've just rewatched
Which
this
film
one."
would you recommend us?
My Friend Totoro.
My Friend Dr. Ro. Okay.
No, Totoro. Totoro.
Okay, guys. So everyone, we need to avoid that.
It's very
I
warm.
even make a notice. It's really
Yep.
interesting. Yeah. Unexpected. Okay.
Yep.
And one more thing. In Ukraine, there is a huge problem with buying licensed digital products. Is there any hope that this crisis would be a positive factor for Ukrainian supplying of licensed content?
I think.
I suppose you even can't imagine the scope of the problem that is.
No, I can. And
people just don't think that they need to pay for songs, videos, etc. It's like not in our nature,
I know. I think it becomes a cultural thing. I don't think it's something that you can change overnight. When the internet was born in the UK, it was exactly the same. People, felt that it was their right to get films, songs, etc. And eventually it was with the innovation of services that were able to provide these, so things like Spotify, etc., when they came in and were able to do it, things like Netflix when they were able to stream it. By replacing those, it became almost unacceptable, socially unacceptable. Of course, they did have some tough guidelines from the government where they came in. That's the question, though. Is there going to be that strong arm? Is it going to be the top of the Ukrainian government's agenda to crack down on these things? How much money is it going to spend to actually crack down on it, and how much money is it potentially losing from this? Do they even know? If they don't know, if they can't put a monetary value on it, then they're not going to do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
In the UK, where we used to have adverts at the cinema that used to say, "Don't steal films" and things like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, the question from Dennis: which technology could have more demand after the crisis? As example, right now there is an influx of projects for telemedicine. Probably there are other branches that will have some splash.
Again, it depends on what industries come out of it, doesn't it, really? What comes out of it. I mean, who is going to be the strongest players in there? Yes, I think, anything that's more cutting edge is going to be appealing to startups and things like that. And I think they will be the strongest. But it depends who is going to come out stronger in terms of, who predicted that Zoom would be so big, etc. And they are built on very traditional things. They're not built on anything innovative. It's going to be, and how are they going to adapt, etc. I talked earlier about the fact that it'll be people like this about how can they, improve the services here that are going to be more widely used. And so, to my mind, it's not so much about which technology; it's more who's going to be the player. Again, I think that you can all have a steer in that. Everybody can have a steer in that if they know the best. If they can do that, we talked earlier about advising the client, etc. And again, that's something that we, can be specialists in. But the problem is, as well, is just don't go for something. I remember being on a project 5 years ago, and the technology manager at the time came in with all these wonderful, fancy ideas he'd heard at the lecture. We spent 6 months building a project on the technology, and then started to realize that it was pretty much not going to stay around for long. So we'd wasted 6 months on doing it. So that's always my worry with technologies. You need to almost draw back and see which industries are coming into the field, which industries are growing, etc.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I will reformulate a question a bit. If you were the investor right now,
Yes.
where would you invest?
Where would I invest in technology?
Yeah.
Again, it's just going to be anything that is, you know, and it's not going to be, I would be more investing in, if I was the investor, I'd be invested in the companies that supply a service. Always my ethos is that I, perhaps uncaringly, I pay less attention to what the technology is behind it, as long as it's producing the functionality that the users are going to buy.
So
what I mean is that nobody cares what Uber's built on.
So you would rather invest more to services rather than products?
Yeah, then I would, once we got there, once we knew what we were trying to deliver, then the technology would speak for itself.
Okay, yeah,
so,
great.
You know, because that's the answer. Once you know what the customer wants, the technology will then stand out. This will be the best technology for that. Rather than having it the other way around to say, we're going to use this technology to build your project. Now tell us what your project is.
Mm-hmm.
So.
The question from the next question is like, thanks for the speech. Do you expect the prices for the services in the IT field in Ukraine to go down compared to before crisis level?
Yeah, it will have to. It will have to, for even if it's for a period of time, because, you know, some companies are going to be, we're seeing this already, that some companies, and it's all in the news, that they're looking for their employees to take voluntary pay cuts. That's going to drive wages, you know, people's salaries down across the board. So the average salary is going to go down as a result of that. And if that's going to be happening in the client offices, then their expectation is that they're going to want to push prices down for their suppliers as well. And that includes, you know, ourselves. That's unavoidable. You know, that is going to happen. And we're going to see that more and more.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I don't think it's, you know, safe to say, you know, I know friends and family who've lost, you know, their jobs because of the crisis. And, you know, I know other people from the UK who are working in the IT industry, and they've been asked, you know, to take large cuts, you know, some for a limited period of time, some it's just, we want you to take a pay cut. So that's going to trickle down until the markets bounce back, etc. And then we'll see that growth again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But again, don't forget as well, we're talking about that we're going to be, I talked earlier about trying to compete for that business. And I do think there are opportunities. I genuinely think there'll be opportunities. But so one of our selling points is going to be cost, isn't it?
Dumping the prices is a way out.
It's a way out, but it's a way of winning more business.
Yeah, sure.
So, you know, we're going to have to gamble, but, you know, it's going to be it's going to be a huge sensitive thing, I think we're going to go into. When we're seeing sort of like airlines being, I know airlines are always financially sensitive, but we're seeing those bailed out. There's going to be a lot of money lost to a lot of people. So
yeah,
that trickles down.
And the last question here, that is really positive. How do you rest from work at home while restaurants and bars are closed?
Well, luckily, there is a shop near me called Beer Mood, and they do very good beer. So that's always good. I can just walk on there.
Takeaway.
Takeaway. It's takeaway, yeah, but it's good. And I also have the Black Door close to me as well, which is good. Most of the time, one of the things that I've done is try to be creative in things like cooking and things like this, to try and look at different ideas. And so just to try and find different things to do that. Virtual drinks. So our team have done that as well. So everybody has a drink, and then everybody goes online at the same time with a drink. And
virtual drinks.
Virtual drinks. Yeah, it's great. So yeah, just everybody jumps on a call, and you just all have your drink with you and have a drink and have a chat and a talk. And because everybody's so used to now doing, you know, the team are so used to doing conversations this way all day, it becomes quite normal just to sit there in your kitchen with a drink in front of you, and you just got your computer and you're just talking to your colleagues and about what they're doing, etc. So that's positive.
Drink, nice idea.
Yeah, it's really good. And I've done it with my family as well. We had a whiskey evening. So a whiskey evening. Now it wasn't as good because my sister had a huge collection of whiskey. So she was able to swap her whiskey every go. My brother and I just had to have the same whiskey every time. But
Okay, that's really cool.
But yeah, it's quite relaxed, etc. Because at least you're talking and you just have the laptop on and you don't worry too much about looking like I'm looking here. It's more casual, etc. So.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you for that conversation. I think your insights were really profound and really helpful to our listeners. Хотелось бы поблагодарить также всех, кто сегодня присутствует с нами. Я надеюсь, вам понравилось наше небольшое интервью с Дэвидом, и его идеи действительно смогут помочь нам не потерять себя, не потерять свою работу, быть на месте и понимать, как нам двигаться, куда нам двигаться и что нам делать в ближайшее время. Еще раз всем спасибо большое за такой приятный разговор, и будем с вами на связи. Thank you, David, one more time.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.